We're going to go ahead and look at example number 1 on solving rational equations and inequalities. So step 1 is to set up the equation. Are these the same or different denominators? Since they're different, we have to set it up first by finding the same denominator. Well, for this one, looks like we need to multiply by n. And now the second fraction, let's multiply by 6 to get us a common denominator, 6n squared. So then we have n all over 6n squared minus 18 over 6n squared. And then that equals 1 over 6n squared. So step 1 is done. Now step 2, we're going to distribute the minus sign and combine like terms. So when we distribute the negative sign, it just turns into a negative 18. So at the top we have n minus 18, and then at the bottom in the denominator we're going to have 6n squared. And then that equals 1 over 6n squared. So now we finish step 2. Step 3, we're going to cross multiply. So once you multiply those, you should get this right here. 6n to the third power minus 108n to the second power equals 6n to the second power. Okay, step 3 is done. Now step 4, we're going to bring everything to one side, so it's going to be everything equals 0. Looks like we want to move this 6n squared to the other side, so go ahead and subtract that from both sides. So we have 6n cubed minus 114n squared equals 0. And we're done with that step. Step 5, we're going to factor out everything we can. These are both even, so we can at least take out 2. They also both go into 6, so we could take out 6, and then we look to see how many n's they have in common. They have 2 n's in common, so we have 6n squared is what we're taking out. If we divide this first term by 6n squared, we have n left over. If we divide 114 divided by 6, you get 19. N squared divided by n squared is just 1. So now we factored it out. Okay, step 6, we're going to solve for n. So we're going to set both of these parentheses items equal to 0 to solve for our 2 different n's. So divide both sides by 6. 0 divided by 6 is just 0 still. Take the square root of both sides. And just equals 0 here. Okay, on the other part, we're going to add 19 to both sides of the equal sign. So n equals 19. So now we're done with step 6. The last step is to check for extraneous. Remember, you cannot have a 0 in the denominator. If you get that, that will be an extraneous solution. So we're going to check by putting both of these back into the original equation, see if they give you true statements. Well, if we look at the first one being plugged in, the 0, notice 6 times 0 equals 0, and we have a 0 in the denominator. So we could go ahead and stop there and say that n equals 0 is extraneous. And now let's go ahead and plug in the other one, n equals 19. So when we plugged them in, we have the 19s, and when we multiply those out, we have denominators that are not the same again. So we're going to have to multiply these to get the same denominators. So let's go ahead and multiply the first fraction by 19. And the second fraction by 6. So go ahead and multiply those out, see what you get. Okay, when you multiply those out, you should get 19 over 2,166 minus 18 over 2,166 is equal to 1 over 2,166. Well, 19 minus 18 is 1, so yes, that works. So n equals 19 is a solution. So our answers would be n equals 19 is our real solution, and n equals 0 is our extraneous. Let's look at example 3 on the same page, solve irrational equations and inequalities. So step 1, we're going to set it up. We don't have to look at the side with only one number or one fraction. We're just setting up the side with either adding or subtracting the fractions. So a and 5a's least common multiple would be 5a. So we could just leave the second fraction alone, and the first one we can multiply by 5 on both the top and the bottom to get our common denominator. So once we go ahead and distribute the 5 and write those out, we should get this. So we're done with step 1. Step 2, we're going to distribute and combine like terms. There's no negative sign, so there's no distributing. And then combining like terms, we have 5a plus 6a is 11a. And then negative 30 plus negative 12 is negative 42. And then the two denominators become one thing, just 5a. And then that equals 5. So we're done with the second step. Step 3, we're going to cross multiply. Since the 5 is by itself, we could put a 1 in the denominator. Go ahead and cross multiply those, see what you get. Okay, you should get 25a equals 11a minus 42. So we're done with step 3. Now we're going to move everything to one side of the equation. Let's move everything over to the left side. So go ahead and subtract 11a from both sides of the equal sign. So then we get 14a equals negative 42. Well, let's add 42 to both sides now. We can't add a's and constants together, so we just write it out like this. 14a plus 42 equals 0. So we're done with that step. Okay, step 5, you're going to factor out everything you can. It looks like both of these numbers, 14 goes into both of those. So if we factor out 14, what we have left over inside is 1a plus 3 equals 0. So now we're done with that. Okay, step 6, we're going to solve. Well, 14 is never equal to 0, so there's no solution here. So we're just going to have a plus 3 equals 0. Subtract 3 on both sides of the equal sign. So you have a equals -3. So we're done with that step. Okay, our last step, step 7, we're going to check for extraneous solutions. So we're going to go ahead and substitute wherever we see an a in the original, we're going to plug in -3 instead to get something that will look like this. We have, is 5 equal to -3 minus 6 all over -3 plus 6 times -3 minus 12 all over 5 times -3. So if you multiply all that out, you should get, is 5 equal to -9 divided by -3 plus -18 minus 12 all over -15. Okay, if you combine like terms, we have is 5 equal to 3 plus -30 over -15. And -30 divided by -15 is a positive 2. So now we have is 5 equal to 3 plus 2. 3 plus 2 is 5. So yes, that works. That is a real solution. So our only solution is a equals -30. So now we're done with step 7. And we can go on to the next example.